Welcome to that episode of Just More Fix. This is James. With me in this episode is Lacey and Kalen.
Hey.
Hello.
You can find us online at justformorefix.com or on Twitter at justformorefix. If you like us, you can support us at Patreon, and you can give us a rating and review at iTunes or wherever you find us at. In this episode, we're going to have another gaming roundtable. And now, it's time to get our gaming fix.
Ely from the Starling Tribune, an Arrow TV show fan podcast, part of the Geek network, just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other amazing geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Welcome to that episode of Just More Fix. Couple quick announcements before we get things rolling today. Indie RPG Day, which I'm sure everyone is tired of hearing about now, but we are going to be running another one in June, and Lacey is going to run a 90s mall crawl using the PIP core system, so it's going to be an awesome, fun time with some 90s awesome / terribleness, maybe? I'm not sure how you want to classify that.
It's definitely awesome.
Right on. The second announcement is our first quarterly zine, Worms, is completed, printed, and out in the wild now. We've released it into the wild. So if you are a Patreon supporter, you can access to it there and download it from our Patreon. And if you are a supporter at the $5 level, we will send you a print copy of it, and you can expose your players to some terrible body horror, awful badness that has been a lot of fun to do. So it's that was our first one, and it went really well, and we're super excited to get the second one rolling. We're actually in the production cycle of it now, and it's about to go to get play tested here very soon. And I guess shout out also to Mustafa Bakir for doing the artwork for Worms for me, and we're going to use him on the artwork for the Hastings party as well, which is our second zine that we're going to put out. So lots of awesome things, and you guys should definitely check it out there. We've got an art preview and lots of other stuff coming for that. Along with the zine, the next zine coming out, I'm actually going to blog and kind of catalog the production cycle of the Hastings party zine, just to sort of show how much trouble it can or can't be sometimes. Give you guys a sort of a look behind the scenes of our creative process and see how things go. All right, so today we're going to have another gaming roundtable because we haven't had one for a while, and we had another recording thing that kind of fell through, and so we just decided we didn't have a topic, so we just thought we'd do an awesome gaming roundtable. So Kalen is here with us today, and you've been on the show before, haven't you?
I've been on the show once.
Once? Okay.
Yeah, when we did a review of Witches.
Yes.
Which, I'm going to be honest, not our finest thing. As it turns out, when we do reviews, we probably should play the game more recently.
Yeah.
Because a few months had lapsed.
I did try to warn you about that.
I know. I'm not going to... It wasn't terrible. I was just, lesson learned.
True story.
Hi, I'm Kalen. If you're interested in video games, I was on a Let's Play channel called Dead Pixel Gaming Society. That was really cool. Lacey is my sister. James is my brother-in-law. That's how I'm related here. And
Big sister.
Big sister. We do have to clarify that. Well, you're kind of the small sister. I got like a foot on you.
She's also the only sister.
Also the only sister.
Unless you're going to refer to Leah as your sister, which is fine with me. I don't really have a preference one way or another, but just so you know.
And yeah, I've been playing with you guys for quite a while, since I was like 16 or something like that.
So would that be like when you started RPG in general, or was there...
There was like a 6... You guys had done a few games with me when I was a little younger, but I think when I really started getting into it was maybe like 6 months before I started consistently playing with you guys. So...
Okay. And so there's some other questions we didn't really ask. So, what games do you usually play? Generally,
I am the DM of my little group, and we play a lot of Pathfinder. We don't have a lot of very exciting
names. Is that the theme music for Pathfinder?
It could be.
It is when you pull it out for me. I'm just teasing.
But we play that for... I've got a campaign that's going on 5 years now, I want to say. It's called Hero Quest. Really, really innovative with that name, let me tell you.
I played that game before.
Have you played Hero? Well,
it's a board game.
It wasn't Pathfinder, though.
Well, I do have a separate... I have a lot of gaming groups. I think I'm in like 4 total.
Are they all Pathfinder?
No, but a lot of them do play Pathfinder. I play Pathfinder on the weekends with a different gaming group, and that is generally Pathfinder. Yeah, I have a lot of Pathfinder in my life, man.
I just thought it was funny how you're like, I play Pathfinder on the weekends with another gaming group that is generally Pathfinder. Did I say Pathfinder? Do you work for Pathfinder, Paizo?
You know, I might... Paizo, if you're interested in another employee, hit me up. I've played your game for like 5 years now. I've earned this.
Right on.
Well, I mean, there's Pathfinder Society that you can run games for, but there's also a division that does just junior gamers, like young people.
I don't know that I've heard of that.
Yeah, so we just found out about it when we were at HoosierCon, because actually the people that they certify to run games for kids are actually all background checked, which I thought was pretty sweet.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, it is really cool.
So anyway, so I'm looking into that. You're good with kids and all that jazz.
Alrighty, so is there any other questions we asked for the intro
Do
thing?
you play anything besides Pathfinder? We didn't really get past that
I do. We play a lot of DC Adventures. If you don't know what that is, that's essentially Mutants and Masterminds, but the DC equivalent. So my friend DJ runs that a lot, and I've played a few characters in that. Last character I played rained down satellites on Gotham. It was a great time. Didn't really go well for my character past that point, but it was fun.
Sounds like a terrible idea.
It was, believe me. And then on a very rare occasion, I'll play some 5e with my friend Damon, who runs 5e. We've only done a few quests. I'm kind of not super into that one, just because I'm not generally around when they play it, so...
So like kind of missing things between sessions. It's like a...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty much.
I could see where that would get
I think they ruled that they're just going to play that one when I'm not around because it's easier. So, and yeah, that's what I do. And I play games with you guys, and I play whatever you feel like running that day, and that's a lovely break because I don't often get to play other systems that I want to play. So
We play all of the systems, basically.
you do.
All right. Should we talk about this? Do you have a favorite system? Doesn't have to be one you play frequently, but like, do you have a...
Well, I feel like my favorite system changes on the day. As of this particular day, I'm going to tentatively say Dogs in the Vineyard with the very little experience I've had.
Nice. We ran that at the shop just at the last...
So I really... Okay,
By we,
so...
I mean James ran that at the shop and I played in it.
Small tangent on the Dogs in the Vineyard thing. I think I was reading some posts about it the other day, and some people were asking questions about it and whether it was a good game to play and whatever. And I really liked it and thought it was very cool. But my only valid criticism that I saw in the thing of where people were talking about it was they really liked the world and the setting that exists in, and it's really cool. But they thought what they didn't like was you could predict the outcome of the conflicts if you just counted the number of die faces a person has in a challenge. And I understand how that could be a problem. But then I thought when you add in your traits and your relationships and all the other things, there's a lot of things that you can add into there. But I just like the idea of how, regardless of whether you can look at it and tell if the conflict is weighted towards you or not, I like the idea of being able to see all the pieces that a person has to sort of spend and use and stuff.
Well, at the same time, like, I see that point, but are you not making that same calculation with other systems?
True, that's very true.
Because I definitely am.
Well, yeah, like when you look at things and you're like, well, I know that I have a plus 9 on this versus a plus 6. Yeah, no, I agree. It was just very interesting because they kind of like broke it down how it actually kind of plays out. But I really still thought there's a certain amount of hidden stuff that you have because if you can find a way to bring in your relationships, traits, and equipment and stuff. So, but I really like that system. I think it's really cool to use for almost anything, really.
And to add on to that point, I know my big thing about it is, yes, you can kind of count, you can kind of figure out how the conflict's going to go, but that's presuming there's no form of escalation as well. And that's what I really enjoy about it is I know that if I'm not going to win, I then have to make a choice of whether I'm going to throw a punch or not, essentially. And obviously, you can't do that in every case, but as a general rule, if I know that it's not going to go in my favor, I can do something about it. Like, I don't just have to accept the fact that I've lost.
Well, and you can also gain experience from that failure. So, like, when you get so many dice or whatever, negative dice, you end up getting experience points that you can spend, like, immediately, which is cool. And the bad stuff is narratively interesting, too, which is always nice.
Oh, yeah.
It was almost like somebody was like, you know what? I really like the storytelling aspects of Fate, but I just want it to be super crunchy. Like, I need it to be so much crunch. And so they're like, and so we did some brainstorming, guys, and this is what we came up with. Because it's super intense for sure.
So kind of transitioning into something we were talking about before the podcast with I'm trying to get my group to enjoy more and different systems than just what they play.
Which we talk about a lot, getting people to play new things. Like, we just did an episode on it not that long ago, so that's why I kind of thought it was cool. So I was like, all right. So we're talking about this right now and how you're making that a thing.
Yes.
So, I also thought it was incredible to talk about because at our table, it's very easy. It's like, hey, I want to run this new game. Cool. Are you, like, now? Like that is quite literally how that discussion goes. What is the game? Oh yeah, okay. So like now or like next week, are you ready to do it? Do you have character sheets printed? Are we, like that's essentially how the conversation goes. But like, I think maybe we're a little desensitized to it because we've been exposed to that sort of really easygoing table for so long that maybe our perspective of things is a little skewed. But I also think that sometimes even if you're, maybe it has to do with the amount of time you've been gaming for, because if you've been gaming for 10 years or so, I'm going to be willing to bet that it's not just fantasy D20 games. Do you know what I'm saying? Like I feel like a lot of people you have this discussion with that don't want to. It's only because haven't been gaming for very long yet. And they're still like head over heels, like over the moon in love with D&D, Pathfinder, whatever, Star Wars, whatever the game is. Right. And they haven't sort of had that, new hotness wear off yet. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Now, when you're talking about the barrier to new games, is it just for the table that you run Pathfinder for, or is it for the other tables that you play games in that only play Pathfinder, or both?
I can't attest too much about playing other locations than what I'll say my other two set groups. I'll call them the Bloomington group and the Danville group. I know it is difficult to transition them to new things. However, as for playing out in the open world, generally if I'm doing that, I'm coming here and playing with you guys. And like you said, you play a pretty good variety of systems. Or I'm going to a con and then I can pick what games I'm going to play.
Right. So right now we're stuck in Pathfinder world.
Yes. Right. We're making progress on leaving. So
we've been in Pathfinder world for how long? Like, when did you first begin to think about other games?
Well, we started in I'm going to say we started in 3.5 world, but here's kind of the thing. When you are a new player and you are the only person who has ever played an RPG of your group of 4 people that want to play an RPG, and then they invite you, and then they tell you on the car ride to the place that you are going to play, hey, you're DMing. I tried to read the rules. I did my best, but that manual is pretty big, and they wanted to play within the first 30 minutes. So I took what limited experience I had from playing with you guys, and from what I could read from the book, and I made something out of that. I think at some point AC was essentially reflex saves, actually. It was a mess, but it was really hard to sit down as someone who generally had no experience with this and just try and come up with it within the first, 30 minutes.
So you're saying it started as 3.5, sort of, and transitioned to Pathfinder, definitely?
Yes. Well, I'm going to put it...
I can't really tell the difference anyway. Like, if I'm playing... If you didn't have, the book or a labeled character sheet in front of me and you didn't tell me, you could say it's either thing and I would not know the difference.
I'm going to actually put quotations around that definitely for the Pathfinder. Because, there are still rules. There are home rules and there's things that, like I said, we've been playing this one Pathfinder campaign for going on 5 years now. We've done
What level are they?
Well, right now, the average party member is, I think 9, maybe?
9th level after 5 years?
Well, all right. So that's the 9th level on, the 5th or 6th character.
Oh, okay. Okay. I was like, my God.
No.
So you get 3 experience. 3. 30? No, 3.
So they've had their fair share of characters in the world, except for one of them actually just recently joined, and boy, trying to catch him up to speed was something else, let me tell you.
So did it start off just as Pathfinder and 5e, I'm assuming? In terms of the games you were playing?
And Pathfinder and 3.5.
And 3.5, okay. And then which came first, 5e or the DC Adventures?
That's a good question. I think we got the 5e book, and then none of us played it.
All right.
And then DC Adventures came in, and we played that, and then later down the road, we actually decided to open up the 5e book and give it a look.
Well, I would argue that there's not much of a departure in terms of the game from 5e to, do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
From 5e to...
From like Pathfinder or third edition to 5e. Like, it's a transition, but like fundamentally it's still very, very similar. You know, I mean, it's not like picking up a whole new game.
Oh, well,
You know
okay,
what I'm
yeah,
saying?
that's fair.
So,
Yeah.
and in the world and the setting are all still the exact same. So is there a hard thing to get past in terms of trying to coerce them into playing the DC Adventures?
But, okay, wait, that's a different group of people, right?
Okay, so
That was my understanding.
No,
It was a
you're all
different
good.
group of people. But...
So the Bloomington group are the ones who play Pathfinder, the 5-year campaign, a little bit of 5e, and DC Adventures. They all play the same one.
Oh, okay.
And then the Danville group will play Pathfinder, and I have also started running DC Adventures for them.
Okay.
Was it difficult to sell them on DC Adventures?
Not at the time. So in the 5 years, we've gone through a lot of iterations of how we feel about the system and how we feel about going forward, what we're going to do. The thing is, at that point, I had been the sole GM for 3.5 years or something like that.
Right.
And I just couldn't churn out one session a week at that point. I had exhausted all of my creative energy. There was nothing left. I didn't have anything. So when my other friend stepped up, and he's a real comic book nerd, and he said, "Hey, I'd be willing to play this," I immediately pushed for it. I'm like, "All right, you do
Done.
you can DM. It'll be great. I can finally play for once. Let's do this."
So did he like bring the books to the table and that kind of stuff, or did?
Yeah, he bought the book online.
Okay.
And he brought it in, and we all kind of...
So had he ever ran games before?
No, that was his first experience.
Right.
And was there conversation at the table before that, like before he brought that in, where you were like, "Listen, guys, I'm running a little short here.
I think there
I'm getting
was.
tired of this."
I think there was. I know that conversation had been on the docket for a span of about 6 months until we kind of have it divided into the first part of that game ended, and then I had brand new ideas for the second part. But there was that amount of time where I didn't have anything that DC Adventures came in and kind of started
Okay.
taking its way in.
So now, when he brought that to the table, were you the only one besides him that was also excited for it, or was everybody else like, "Yeah, let's do this," or were they skeptical? Like, what was the tone?
I think we were all pretty excited. We were pretty excited to leave Pathfinder for a change, I think. It had just been so long, and they had learned enough to the point where the thing about Pathfinder is if you know enough of it, you can break it. Like, you can do that in every game, but we had a dude who was juggling a pistol so that he could reload it as a free action. It was a whole thing. So we had gotten to kind of one of those crazy points where we just we decided
The
enough
wheels
was
had
enough.
came off.
Exactly.
I think that's the term that you're looking for. Right, so, are you guys going to pick up any other games now that, as time has gone by and you guys have settled in on 5e or DC Adventures and stuff like that? Is there anything else that you guys have?
Actually, we have a lot of things on the docket, I'd say, and that's kind of a problem on my part. It's kind of a problem, actually. So we do have a witch campaign that I have ran a few sessions of. We really, really enjoyed it, but it's been a long while since I've been able to play it because I've been so busy. And when we have the whole group here, they want to play HeroQuest because it's the 5-year thing. It's what we do. So HeroQuest, by the way, is the name of the campaign that's in Pathfinder. I've gotten it, and what I did with that game is I also made it real time. So we'd play it like once a week, and I'd have 1 week pass in real time.
With the witches thing?
With the witches thing.
Okay.
But it's been like 3 months now, so we'll see what their characters are up to after 3 months. Last I checked, they were hiding from the FBI, so I guess it really makes sense about the 3-month skip. But
It's actually, yeah, that's pretty good.
and the other thing about it is there's an invention system, and one guy went all out to build like a really big invention. And he built a time machine, and it took 18 months. Well, that was real month time. We haven't played Witch very much, but we played it over a long span of time.
Okay.
So as of today, literally, I think it's exactly today, the time machine is done.
So how did you decide as a GM? Like, 18 months is a big investment of an individual to ask for a game, but it's still a freaking time machine.
Yeah, no, that's even the worst part. In part of I kind of sat down at the table and we agreed on the invention rules, because there was invention rules, but, time machine wasn't explicitly listed. And I think somewhere down the line in the agreement, he agreed he wasn't going to tell me what he's going to do with the time machine. I told him it's one use only. and you can come back to the present, but he didn't tell me what he's going to do with it.
It'd be great if he just went back 18 months and decided to make a different adventure.
He promises me that it's going to be something giant, and he still hasn't told me. And I'm still in the dark.
So just to play
I'm willing to
devil's
bet it's probably
advocate,
going to be a letdown. It's how that, like, you build something up that long, it's probably, like...
if he invests another 18 months, can he have another time machine?
We'll look at that again if he decides
Like
to try again.
Only so much plutonium in the world, or... Right, okay. Have you considered doing downtime actions for that game, since it's in real time?
We haven't looked at it too much, just because I don't think a lot of thought got thrown into the downtime yet. It was just much more in the moment of all the wild and wacky things that they kind of go through in Chicago that I really probably shouldn't let them get away with. So I think they're more focused on the present than they have been in the downtime. Plus, I feel like a lot of their downtime, one of the characters just lost their brother in game, so a lot of it's just like grieving, and they all have their own little personal demons because that's how Witch works. So it's trying to get through that fact, and a lot of it's just been dealing with their characters' emotions and their day-to-day activities, I think. So
I'm writing David Jones in pen on my character sheet.
Oh, in pen. It's serious now. So serious.
So
So what else are you considering?
So we've also run Fate.
did you run Fate Core or Fate Accelerated?
We had Fate Core, but we decided to do a weird... So in my attempt to transition people from other systems while trying to keep them in their little hidey hole, we did what I call the combo system. So they were mech pilots, and all the pilot skills and all the things the pilot could do were in Fate.
Okay.
But once they stepped into a mech in the giant space pirateness of space, they went into a DC Adventures character. And the mechs were DC Adventure characters that fought each other because it was the DC Adventures rules allow very fantastical things to happen. So they fought each other in very fantastical ways, but the second they were outside the mech, they were a pilot, and they'd run around in Fate. And we do a kind of a rating thing with all of our sessions for all of our games, and those two the 2 sessions we've run of it have rated really high, but it's another one of those issues where I just haven't had time to run a third yet.
That's a cool idea, to use 2 different systems, and kind of like really illustrates the difference between when they're one thing and when they're the
MechWarrior
other.
had something similar to that, where you had like BattleTech, which was the robot combat, like war game style thing where you're counting hexes that you move, and if you turn to the left one direction, it's this much points or whatever. And then they developed it into an RPG as well because of like shows like Robotech and that kind of stuff, where you had your pilot, and like you had a pilot in the BattleTech game, but it wasn't as like flushed out or whatever. There's only a couple statistics that you might have for like attacking or dodging or, movement or whatever. And then they added a whole much larger world to it with a history. And then you had a regular character that could sort of like go on missions or do things, regular espionage stuff that you do, like not in a giant kaiju robot kind of a thing.
It's totally undercover and stealthy.
Yeah. Yeah. BattleTech was so funny because you could have actually infantry units on the map. So you'd have like these giant mechs running around and blowing stuff up and mayhem, and they fly and rocket jumps and all this kind of stuff. And then you could have like a poor little infantry unit out there with like machine guns and RPGs against this giant robot. And I always thought it was fun because I like to have like the hero of, I was like the person trying to like do damage with the infantry, or like you could have tanks and that kind of stuff too, against the giant kaiju, because like it was hopeless. They're terrible, but it was fun to be like, oh, we're gonna get you, and then they get squashed, and it was just it was a great moment. So, BattleTech, yeah,
Awesome.
right on.
Something we talked about before, like with Kurt and that when we went to Fate, there was kind of a mental barrier to understanding how that system works versus the very concrete system of Pathfinder. So did the players that you transitioned, did they have a problem making that kind of like frame of mind shift? Or?
It was actually, I would say, a pretty sizable problem at first. Yeah. We are very used to crunchy systems where everything has a rule, everything has a die attached to it. You can statistically build your character for any situation, but the moment that things became a little more abstract, and that they weren't certain what they needed to use in every scenario, that at very first, that was kind of an issue of trying to figure out what we can and cannot do and how it does and does not work.
It's almost because you don't understand the language to plug into the game in a way, because the way you use the compels and spending of aspects and all that kind of stuff, it's kind of weird to get in that rhythm, especially if you're coming from a place where, like you said, everything has some sort of bonus or negative or modifier that you have to deal with to do anything. I want to juggle a pistol while I reload or whatever, take a -2, whatever the hell it is, But like, whereas in Fate, it's just that you either have aspects you just tap to do it, or, and you're all so hyper competent about nearly anything you attempt to do anyway. Mm-hmm. It's kind of weird to go from a mindset of where my attacks might only hit 2/3 of the time or whatever it is. Whereas in Fate, it's sort of like, well, I always hit because that's what I do. Like that's my jam.
Well, I always think a little bit, this seems silly. Like Fate reminds me of volleyball a little bit, because like you're setting people up for stuff. So
right.
It's like a 3-step process. It's
right.
like, I'm going to do this to create an advantage, and you're going to do that to create an advantage. And then, this guy's going to run down the front, take both those advantages and spike it right in your face.
It's very definitely that way. And also, I think sometimes being a game master, if you're not familiar with it too, when you're running a game for people who haven't played it, you have to sort of like model how the system works and show them, I'm going to spend this fate point so my bad guy can do X, right? And then you see, oh, okay, I can do that then? Yes, you can do that. And so much more, And whereas it's very codified, like this thing, you get one action and then you get to move 5 feet and then you get this attack of opportunity and then whatever,
you kind of a cool long game with Fate, where you're like setting things up.
Yeah.
For
See, that was where I got lucky, is I could tell there was a clear, not full understanding of it yet, but the one thing I do have about my players is they are very smart. So as soon as they got it the first time, the gimmick, they got it all the way on.
Yeah, well, it's pretty straightforward. There's really only one major difference. It's like, hey, we're not playing a war game with a story. Mm-hmm. We're telling a story that has some very broad and loose mechanics to it in a way, So I think like it's not a big hump to get over, but it is kind of a weird thing to sort of wrap your head around at the beginning of it. And then once that happens, you're off to the races and good to go.
Exactly.
So I'm not really familiar with the DC Adventures. So can you give us like a 20, 30-second synopsis of what the system looks like for that?
Sure. So the DC Adventures system, you have advantages, which are kind of like feats. You have your basic attribute points, which, strength, intelligence, presence, yada, yada, yada. Some skills, and then the big bread and butter of it is you have powers. And your powers are very loosely defined, and they can be flavored however you'd like. So, say I have flight. Well, if Superman has flight, and let's see, who's a good example of someone else who flies? The Red Tornado. Let's say he has flight. They fly in different ways, but they both fly.
Okay. So
you kind of make your character out of a series of powers and how those powers would affect the world. So, for example, we think of Flash. Mm-hmm. He's fast.
Yes, he is.
He's very fast. He might, in fact, be famous for that.
You could say he's super fast.
I could say he's indeed super fast. So you sit down and you're like, all right, obviously I'm going to need speed because I'm the Flash. I want to go fast.
Right.
But there are other things that he does because of his speed that are other effects that would be flavored like that. So I know I do believe there's some comics that have him making an actual tornado. Obviously, that wouldn't fit into speed, but that would be...
like generating heat to melt out of...
Yeah, exactly. So there's like, there's resistances, there are kind of like immunities, there are attacks, which I would probably label that as, that are area attacks. And it's just all these powers and how you implement them into your character to make it how your character works.
Okay.
Aberrant works in a similar way. It's the World of Darkness. It's a White Wolf version of a superhero game. Like, you have the quantum bolt, right? Because that's what fuels all your power. So whether that's Pyro shooting a fireball, or Iceman shooting the ice ball, or anybody shooting the whatever ball, Electro shooting the electric ball, or whatever it is, it's just a quantum bolt. So then you can kind of define what it is in whichever way you want.
Looks,
yeah, basically. It's more like a flavor text. Same thing with flying or any kind of thing that way. And I believe like all of I'm not sure who did it first, whether it was Aberrant because that came about like in the 90s, or whether it was Mutants and Masterminds, or who made it first. Mm-hmm. But like that's the premise. It seems like most of the more solid superhero games are kind of based around it. And it's like this is a broad scope of powers, figure out how yours works. Because then you also don't have to have the debate of, well, whose flying is better? Mine is powered by fire, but yours is powered by anti. It doesn't matter. You just both fly.
Exactly.
You know, spend the point. If you have 6 and fly, then you fly faster than the guy with 5 and fly, or whatever it is. But there's much less sort of nitpicking little bitty pieces of how your powers work or whatever.
So you've got your attributes, your skills, your powers. What's the actual like physical system? Is it like a D20 system? Is it D10s?
It is a D20 system. So let me make sure I got this right off the top of my head. You have dodge and parry, and that's kind of like an AC. However, dodge is for ranged attacks, and parry is for close range attacks.
That makes sense.
So you're trying to beat different DCs depending on whether you're trying to shoot the guy or stab the guy. And then once you've decided you've hit them, you have a set amount of damage, and your it is whatever your damage is plus 15, and that is a DC that the person who got hit has to make off of their toughness roll. So their toughness, they'll add a d20 plus whatever their toughness is, and depending on if they succeed, then nothing happens. If they fail, depending on how much they failed by, they get hurt worse and worse, and if you fail by enough, you're just straight on unconscious.
So that makes sense in kind of the superhero realm, like, you know, taking the hit and, you know.
Exactly.
Right, okay.
And there's a lot of going back and forth, which can be kind of interesting. But at the same time, it gets a little tedious in the same way that it does in World of Darkness, where it's like, I rolled a hit, I hit you. Okay, cool. I have fortitude. You rolled damage. Oh, no, you don't damage this time. Now I'm going to hit you back. It's like in one combat round, you have an attack roll, a dodge roll, a damage roll, a soak roll, and I have 4 rolls for like one dude trying to hit you. Like, okay, cool. I'm hitting you back now.
Boss fight.
4 more rolls, you know, and it just kind of gets a little frustrating that way sometimes. So a lot of, I don't know, there's ways to streamline or whatever, so you only have 1 roll, but it just does get a little tedious sometimes.
Flavor-wise, very different from Pathfinder, but the physical system, still a D20 polyhedral set, attribute and skill.
There are some differences that I feel like are pretty notable. You don't roll anything but the D20. The D20 is it. Your attack roll is set. You can take some feats to kind of up and down them by 5 each way, depending on the enemy you fight. You know, some enemies dodge better than others, but take worse of a hit, so on and so forth. My big, and the other thing about it is whenever you make a power, you have the option, if you want to spend less points on that power, to make a flaw with that power.
Ooh, that's neat.
Yeah. So, like, say, I punch super hard, and you can add a flaw in there. Some flaws can be worse than others.
But you can only get hit one time?
That's more of a character flaw.
Isn't that One Punch Man's thing?
Punch.
Like, I can knock anybody out with one hit, but if you hit me once,
can make
then I'm
One
done.
Punch Man if you truly want.
Sorry.
But say you can only punch really hard, and then you want to spend way less points. I can only punch really hard on Tuesday. Every other day, I punch pretty normal. But on Tuesdays, you better look out.
So you can make a flaw like, I punch really hard, but I always have to punch really hard. Like, there's no, like, I'm just going to tap this person and subdue them. Like, no, I'm always going to knock them, probably kill a regular person every time.
That can definitely be a flaw. Awesome. So it is that I do think that was a nice gateway into other games that are a little less crunchy. Because it does still have a bit of crunch for it, obviously. But the fact that there was all that freedom to just make your powers and make your flaws as you need, I think really helped them expand past just looking for whatever's the best and more or less looking for what they want.
And everybody's familiar with the genre, the themes, the actual characters, you know, of the DC universe.
Exactly.
So we're familiar with, you know, the general storyline, which is helpful.
Batman.
And Man-Bat.
Batman.
Because you can't bring up Batman without me mentioning Man-Bat.
Like, you know, the rest of them don't really. There's the fish guy.
Fish guy.
And Batman.
Clayface.
And the fish guy.
Sandman.
Nah, he doesn't matter.
We ran into like 14 billion different lanterns by this point, so that's a
Everything that
pretty
needs a
overwhelming
man.
theme.
Man.
So,
Speaking of Batman, if you haven't read the Wayne of Gotham book that Tracy Hickman wrote, it's really very good.
I'm gonna have to check that out.
it's one of those things he said he
I have
always
it if you want to borrow it.
always wanted to write for Batman, to just be able to have done that or whatever, because he's a fantasy writer, so he grew always a big Batman fan or whatever. So I actually haven't read that one yet, so it's on my list.
I hadn't read any of his other books, so my nerd cred was like lacking, but I didn't want to read fantasy, so I was like, Batman, yes. Now I can be like, yeah, I've read a Tracy Hickman book. Yeah, who hasn't?
going back to the last set of trying something out different, there is one last game that we have not done yet, but is currently in the works.
Well, there's more than one game you guys haven't played yet.
All right, well, I understand
I'll
that.
find you another one.
There's one game I can
We've
convince
ran
someone.
20 of them at a game store near you.
No. Okay,
I
so
did spend an entire trip back from Chicago talking to my friend Kalen about Dogs of the Vineyard, and after I explained to him the system and how everything works, he's like, that sounds really cool. Maybe we can... And then he started talking about, like, running it and whatever, and I'm like, yeah, you can totally run that. And he goes, me? I was like, yeah, you can totally run that if you want. So I talked to him and I said, all right, if you want, I will teach you what I know about the system, and I will work through it, and we'll do like a 6 sessions of the classic dog with the dogs in the vineyard. But what he wanted to do is he wanted to change the setting, and he wants to do English street gangs.
So here's the only thing that I'll say, because I've seen this about using Dogs in the Vineyard to do different settings and worlds, right? Mm-hmm. So the whole reason that Dogs kind of works, and I think is interesting, is because the world is built on hard moral choices, right? Everything the dogs do, that's what it's all comes back to, right? So in a way, like, when you are rolling the dice and putting things at risk and how much fallout do I want to take and making all these decisions, the reason you're more likely to do that is because, like, it's you're God's watchdog. Like, everything you do matters. You are, in fact, the will of the King of Life, right? And so, whereas you might think that some things are about hard moral choices, probably, like, not in the same intense kind of way. Because that's why I wanted to use it for a Dark Tower Gunslinger book, right? Because Roland, everything he does is in pursuit of the Man in Black. It's all a means to an end about this huge cosmic thing that he's trying to work towards or whatever. Even if he is on a train that rhymes and it's dumb. But nonetheless, still working towards the Man in Black, right? But, like, because there were some other people that I saw talking about using dogs for a couple other different things. They're like, you probably could do it, but it would sort of lose some of the flavor of the way the Fallout kind of works, because it's built around like your position in society and how big of a moral impact you have for the world around you. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I get that, but I think with a gang, it might actually work really well. Like an actual, like, traditional street gang. Yeah, because you have that hierarchy. You're beholden to the larger group. Everything you do impacts your family, so to speak, and the neighborhood.
I see what you're saying. My only thing would be is if it goes into, which I think in a street gang situation, it's likely to go into a player versus player kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, that whole thing goes off the rails bad.
Yeah, it's a bad system for that.
Because then it becomes, we've talked about before, how you can really kind of define who is going to be able to win. And if you're that game, the characters are very well intertwined. So you're going to know what everyone has to bring to bear. And I can just tell you, like, well, my character is very physical and yours is not.
Although that's kind of cool too. It almost gives you like White Wolf kind of plotting and planning to overthrow someone.
But the thing with that though is it's hard. Like, you can initiate a conflict even in a social way and sort of like push things to where you want it to go. Even outside of the manipulation part of it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because then the choice is, do I escalate it? In which case I know I'm going to lose or whatever. So I think it kind of, I don't know. I'm not saying it's impossible to do. I just think that it would be one of those areas where it's going to be difficult. And if it goes wrong, then it's going to go really sideways, because then you're going to have this, the way the Fallout works and everything else, and just giving in a conflict and saying, okay, I give up. And then you're sort of at that person's mercy for whatever they want to do to you in a way. Like, you have to kind of agree to the terms, but nonetheless, I feel like, with the dogs thing, they're really bound together. Do you know what I mean? Like, there might be some player versus player in like more of like a social hierarchical political kind of a thing. You know what I mean? As opposed to like, well, Davey used to be the gang leader and then I stabbed him in the neck and now I'm the gang leader. Do you know what I mean? Like, because, well,
right. I know personally we have kind of a strange, I don't want to call it a house rule, but that's exactly what it is. For a lot of our games, where a lot of us really like to make diplomatic, lying, charisma buffs, whatever. But we've all kind of made a silent agreement that if you have a skill or something mechanical to influence another player, you cannot use it. Mm-hmm. You can use that on any NPC in the entire game that you want at any point, whenever.
Well, I think what you're talking about there, though, might be part of the fact that in most of the games that you're playing where social conflict is a thing, it's a one roll thing. Mm-hmm. So I roll a die, and if I roll good, then I do it, and now you do what I want, or I roll bad and you don't. Whereas in like Dogs, or a Burning Wheel or lots of other games, even Fate, the social conflict resolution part is much more than just one roll. So it's not like I roll good and now you suck. And do you know what I'm saying? Whereas like in Dogs, like part of that is the escalation process. So if we start off talking, putting forth your raises and going back and forth sort of allows for more agency for each player to do their own thing as you go back and forth, sort of describing how it is you're making your point and doing whatever, as opposed to just saying, I'm going to roll my diplomacy and you're going to do what I want. You know what I mean? There's more of a give and take and a back and forth, like a negotiation, as opposed to just all or none.
Right. And we have, obviously, because it's I feel like a very important part of the game, we have done social influence and fate. Right. Obviously on different player characters. But I feel like we've, because we had a point where we had one person who was more charismatic. This is when we were playing Pathfinder. We had one person who was more charismatic than, anybody else. And, they had a dumb barbarian and roll diplomacy. Oh, look, the dumb barbarian does what you say because you rolled diplomacy. Big woo. But we felt like that was taking so much agency away from the players.
I get it. I see both sides of the argument because I feel like in one way, like you don't want to completely hamstring somebody off of one die roll, but
I disagree.
No, and I'm going to go the exact opposite way though, because there's a reason why charisma shouldn't be a dump stat for just what you throw things away, because guess what? Charismatic people rule the world. Right. They manipulate loads of henchmen into going and fighting in, all kinds of stuff. Or, hey, you go into that orc cave and go kill the orc. So I'm going to stand out here and trim my nails or whatever it is that I'm going to do, right? Because I'm more important. And I think, the idea is that your characters are the heroes of the story or the protagonists of the story. So you don't want to totally take someone's, influence away from them or agency away from them. But at the same time, I do think it's a relevant thing to say, hey, slack-jawed idiot, go do what I said, because that's what slack-jawed idiots do. Sure. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know. Kind of go back and forth on it, I guess.
No. You made your choices. You chose to have your moment to shine be in physical combat.
Right.
So
no, I guess what I'm saying is that
social combat is my moment to shine.
I think you shouldn't be able to make someone do something that would be completely coerce them into something that would be completely out of character for them.
I think you should be able to.
Well, not maybe with one die roll, but if you wanted to.
I think you should have the argument in character first, but and then you should roll the dice and you do what I say, because that's where I put my money.
I kind of agree on that, but that is the big thing too, is that very important part you mentioned is I always make the characters have argument in character first.
Right.
And if the charismatic person is saying something that is very obviously completely unreasonable, I'm not going to give you the roll. You can't, if you say, hey, you should shoot yourself because, I'm just feeling bad today.
Survival always, plays a play. You're not going to literally kill yourself, but, I can definitely convince you to do something that is against your best interest for sure.
Sure.
Now, when it turns out badly, are you allowed to, in character, hold that against me? And maybe next time a goblin's trying to shank me, not be so helpful? For sure, you can also do that.
I just feel like it is kind of a thing where there's just different scales, there's different situations, there's different gambits, so it'd have to be something we explore. But my thinking is, if he is interested, because he's never GM'd either, if he's interested in GMing something, I am fully willing to work with him to try and help him to figure out how to overcome that issue. And if that's what he's going to do, I'm not going to steer him away from it. That's kind of where I'm at.
Here's the unfortunate reality, though, is that we all run games that we want to play.
Yeah.
So that's sort of how it works. You know what I mean? So if you're pitching Dogs in the Vineyard to him, that's the game that you want to play. So you're probably going to end up running it. That's just the way it works. You know?
It's the sad truth, but yeah.
So, because that's part of the reason why I run so many different games, is because I want to play all of these games. And I realize sometimes it's easier to convince other people to play in a game that I will run for them than it is for me to say, hey, you learn this game, make a plot, and then come find me. you know what I'm saying? You
could also consider Blades in the Dark.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to
say. But it has an interesting gang territory mechanic.
Yeah. It's actually a game designed for gangs.
Fate, so...
No, it's Powered by the Apocalypse.
Sorry, yes.
But it's a different style of Powered by the Apocalypse.
It's a very hardy Powered by the Apocalypse system. So there's a lot more there.
In PBTA, you're rolling 2d6 plus a stat. And then the 6- is a failure. 7 to 9 is a succeeded cost, and 10+ is a hit. Blades, though, is like a dice pool, so you don't roll the dice and add them together. You build a dice pool of d6s, and then you roll them, and then it's sort of like you're looking for the number of successes that you have in a way. It's sort of like a dice pool kind of a thing, but with the Power by the Apocalypse ethos or whatever. Do you know what I'm saying? Like succeed at a cost with pick lists and questions and that kind of stuff. So it's slightly different. It's a pretty big departure from Power by the Apocalypse, but I would still say it's in that same vein, if that makes sense. There's a lot of people that want to debate back and forth for whether it actually is PBTA or not, and I think it's really kind of splitting hairs. It's definitely informed by that. It's definitely got a 1 foot in that, but also
it's set in what else I would call a post-apocalyptic steampunk era.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
but without beating you over the head with steampunk. So it's like
that sort of Victorian age sort of feel. You know?
London style town on the ocean. The ocean has turned black. They have to extract this. There's leviathans that are in the ocean, and they have to extract the oil from the leviathans to power everything in the city. And there's ghosts and all this other stuff, and you're a gang, and you get to choose what your gang is, like what they do and how they go about doing things and stuff. So it's really good. And the other thing that's cool is it's playbooks, which is always fun because then it means I'm the only whisper and you're the only duster or whatever, or dusker, right, whatever it is. So like everybody gets to be their own thing, but it is a game where everyone is terrible. It's a game of villains.
It's also kind of neat because you make jobs and you decide on the job and you sort of like work backwards. You're like, okay, this is the job. This was the plan. This, and now we're going to go work backward and see how things went terribly wrong. So let's go ahead and role play what happened.
So think of a heist movie, right? So in the heist movie, there's a very brief planning scene at the beginning of a heist movie, right? And then the actual movie is them pulling off the heist, right? So then when they get to the secret laser part or whatever, where they can't get through the laser beam security system, there's a flashback to them training about what they did to get past that obstacle. And that's how the game works, is that so it's like we get to the thing and then there's a secret alarm and then someone gets to spend points and make a roll and stuff and say, well, this is how we trained to get past that and we knew about it and whatever. So instead
of like preparedness.
Yeah.
Like the skill preparedness.
So instead of like spending 3 hours of preparation for what you may not use any of it in the actual heist, now we just go right to the heist and look at how we actually got ready and made things work. But you still have resources you have to manage and all that kind of stuff. It's not just like wide open and we do it no matter what.
And it prevents that preemptive paralysis that can happen too when you always have that one person that's like, I just don't know that this is going to work out. I don't think I want to do it at all. So but you're doing it, and so
you basically pick a general approach for how you're going to accomplish the job and then go, which is it's fun. It's good. It's the best way I think I've seen it done. So
yeah, I think that definitely sounds interesting. I think he would probably think that sounds interesting too. So I'll pitch that to him and see how he feels about that.
Really, I think pitching PBTA games to people as a new game is probably the easiest way to go because they're all so thematic and do their one version of PBTA pretty well. So it's like, hey, I have this game that's all about whatever seashell collectors, right? And that's all about collecting seashells, and that's all it is. So then it's easy to like if they're interested in that whatever that one genre element is, you can just suck them right in and be like, cool, let's do this. You just got to get past the initial part of being like, well, we're not using the D20, and just like the hump with overcoming in Fate, where you have to understand the succeed at a cost mechanism. But I feel like there's a lot of tools in Apocalypse World to be able to get over that right away because you get pick lists. So if it's a complete success, 10+, it says choose 3 of these 4. If it's a 7 to 9, it tells you choose 1. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it paints a much clearer picture in terms of what that varied success looks like for the players. So I feel like it gives you better tools to sort of get in that framework or whatever.
Since I run DC Adventures for the Danville group, pitching that to them was a totally different experience because it's obviously a new player group or a different player group. But I had one player, I love him, but God bless his soul. He refused because I think I pitched Witch first, and he refused because he does not want to play any system that is not powered by a D20. That is his hard rule. Is that he's not rolling a D20 as his main roll. He's not playing it.
But why?
I think that might be the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
I questioned him about it. I tried to change his mind. He is
like that sounds sounds like some straight up like 6th century orthodoxy or something. Do you know what I mean? Like, we only do the mass in Latin or whatever it is, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Like, the D20 is sacred. Thou shalt not roll any die other than thine D20.
Which is what, D10?
Yes, it's a dice pool.
2d10.
Yeah. So would you just consider doing 2d20 instead? And just still playing the game?
We actually did do an
just
attempt.
adapting it by divided by 2 whenever you're...
I remember I did play Witch with him at one point, and he said, all right, instead of 2d10, 1d20 equals the same amount. I will handicap myself and roll 1d20. And I said, all right, you know what? Fine. If you're handicapping yourself instead of buffing yourself, I'm not even going to complain. You do you.
All right. I feel like it's a happy compromise.
It was. It worked.
My God.
And did he have a good time playing the game?
He did, actually. He enjoyed himself, I
He
think.
had a great time rolling his D20.
He had a great time rolling his 1d20.
Like, at any point, did he look like he was considering the other dice at all? Like,
not even a little bit.
Does he play Monopoly?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. Does he play any other board games?
I feel like I've gotten him to play a board game at some point.
Did he use a D20 to play that board game?
Yes, he was playing Sorry with a 1d20.
I win every time. It's amazing.
Until you get onto home and you're like, oh, I have to roll a 3 or a 4. No.
I just sort of feel like that's the most ridiculous thing or like qualification to not play a game I've ever heard. Like, I'm not playing this game. It doesn't use a D20. I'm like...
But I feel like I definitely know people that would be like that.
Really?
Yes.
Who?
You know, just like people. Just,
You can't call someone out on the D20
They are
roll
people
here.
that we don't play games with. That's who they are.
that is true.
It doesn't make like.
But like, if they were gamers, I could see that being an aspect of their personality.
Like, I really feel like at a certain point it makes more sense to be like.
It's like the person that goes to the same restaurant whenever they go out to eat and orders the same thing every single time. No, the same restaurant every time, and also orders the same thing every time.
So
that's not you.
I worked.
I know you get a taco salad at every Mexican restaurant.
True.
But to be fair, that's almost the exact same thing as everything else you get there. Like, just the taco shell is fried.
Correct. I don't disagree. So,
like
but I just want to make one.
shell.
I just want to make one point is that when I was partners with Sean, we ate breakfast at the same place every shift. I got the same exact thing, and so did he every shift. We ate lunch at the same place and got the exact same thing for like a year and a half. So.
Have you considered rolling something besides a 1d20?
Always. More dice is better. I can tell you, I can still to this day tell you what his breakfast is.
And if you were to play an RPG with him, do you think
Would he roll a 1d20 or
Like-
something else?
I don't
D20?
I don't think he'd play a game. But nonetheless, like, I just that
He'd play, but like only if there was a barbell that he could hold.
Yeah, it's a D20 barbell. Man. I don't know. It just seems I cannot believe someone actually thinks that.
I think I could be wrong. I don't want to misquote him on this, but I do believe it's because he can be a bit superstitious sometimes, and his 1d20 is very lucky, I think was his reasoning.
Right. So what does he roll for damage?
He'll roll something else for damage, but the main thing he's rolling has to be the d20.
Like, we're going to transport you into a universe where there are no. What is it, dodecahedron? Is that what it is? It's physically impossible to create that shape. So in this world,
Dodecahedron.
But it does throw him out of a lot of things, because I know that there's no way I'll be able to run an apocalypse game with him, because that's not a d20. Fun side story. While trying to use the Apocalypse World system I just tried to use the vanilla to try and, move people out of their shells. That was one of the first things I tried. It was partially my fault because it wasn't a great game. But I quickly learned that my Bloomington group, not a big fan of one-offs. Because I talked to them about the feedback and they were like, yeah, it's all right. And I was like, I'm sorry it wasn't the best game. He goes, no, I know I'll never see that character again. So I don't really feel like playing the system. They just hate... That was the day I learned they just don't like one-offs.
So do they, like, I don't know, I view it as a movie. So, like, I go see lots of movies that don't have sequels, and I still enjoy those movies because they're fun in that moment.
I feel like anymore I don't get to see movies that don't have sequels. Like,
True.
even if it doesn't
22
have one
movies
now.
later with
I watched a movie in the 90s. Suddenly there's a sequel
Yeah.
next year. What is happening?
But I just feel like, and then the other part of it is also, if it's a one shot, it's like, please, here's a character, make the worst decisions that you can make because it doesn't matter. Like, there's no consequence. It's gonna, like, there's consequence in the game. But it's like, cool, we're done. I am like, my character's life is wrecked. It's never gonna be safe. It doesn't matter. But it's all wrapped up in one thing, and then you're done. And I think that's part of the fun of one shots sometimes.
And I kind of agree on that. It's just there was a lot of sentiment of, I feel like I invested a lot of time into everything about this character, and I'm not going to see him again. And, well, I know at the end of this, either I'm going to retire or I'm going to die. There's not going to be anything past this, so they didn't feel invested about their character and their story.
Like, I get that if you were making, like, a D&D character, but, like, that Apocalypse World character, you filled in, like, 3 dots, man.
Well, I very passionately see how dark I filled in this circle.
So that's another thing that I'm lucky about with my players that kind of turned into unluck at some point, is I gave them... There was at one point that I made the move, I want everyone to be more invested in their Pathfinder character. So I told them, you can have... I think it was like 200 extra XP if you can write me a page on your character. I got a page, and then I got 2 pages, and I got 5 pages, and my last character, someone sent me 10 pages, and they're all sending me resumes on what their character does and what they have.
So I just be like, cool, I'm reading the first paragraph and the last paragraph.
I think the gentleman has sent me a 20-page backstory on his location.
Do they think you read them?
I try. I do my best. If you guys, I'm going to tell you all to listen to this. If you guys are listening to this, I try so hard to read all of your things, but I can't do it.
But that's the thing of it is it's like you got to realize at a certain point that I'm running a game, so I have this entire thing that I'm doing, and then you're going to ask me to do all this extra. It's hard enough to get players to do, I don't know, homework is kind of a funny word for it or whatever, but like to write this background, right? So now you get frustrated and don't want to do this, and now you get it done, and you give me a dissertation on why, I don't know, you only roll a d20. like I just feel like it's hard to... Like, at that point, I almost feel like you're asking to write the story of this game by giving me a 20-page background that you want me to incorporate, maybe? Do you know what I'm saying? Maybe if you want to write that 20 pages for self-exploration as to who your character is, okay, fine, whatever. Do that.
But give me a summary. To characters, right, but when I make them. But I feel like when you're playing Apocalypse World, like, maybe the first time that we did it, I was a little sad, when I didn't get to play the character again. But then I changed my mind about how I played it in that... Like, now I'm no longer playing this character. I'm playing the most stereotypical version of this archetype of character.
Right.
So it's less like my character and more like a character I'm playing in a like a TV show or something.
And just to clarify, to interject, I do have to clarify. I think a lot of the time they write these papers upon papers. They're not always for me. I think sometimes they write them for themselves.
Well, they always write them for them.
Well, they write them for them so they know what their character is and they have it all written down so they can address. And they don't expect me to read most of them don't expect me to read all of their pages.
Well, part of it, I feel like at a certain point, it's like, am I an English teacher? Like, I don't want to grade your paper. You know what I mean?
It's nice too, though. Like, if you take a break from that game and then you come back and you're like, who was this character again? Then you can go back and read your own notes and your backstory and be like, oh, okay. I
get that for yourself. Now, I will tell you it's not like tabletop role playing, it's LARP, but it's exactly relevant to the situation. Is in the World of Darkness games that we were running, we asked people, hey, write a couple paragraphs, 2-3 paragraphs or whatever, and that's what we asked for. And sometimes we get it and sometimes you wouldn't. Sometimes you get one that's way too long, sometimes, but the most effective one that I ever got was from Paul, and it was like a more or less like a brief, somewhere between like bullet points and a poem about the character. And like, that's all I'm asking is to get a feel for who your character is. That's what I need.
Like what do they call those ads you put, like a classified ad? Like in the
right. But like because really all I'm trying to do is I don't need to know like the greatest tragedy of why you were born on the third Sunday under the new moon. Like I need to have a sense of who your character is and what you want to do with that character and how I can wrap that up into the plot that I'm writing. And if I'm trying to sort through 20 pages of text, it becomes hard to find maybe what the detail was that you thought was the most important versus what is the least important. And there's just too much there to sort through. And then you end up like, I feel like because there's so much. If you write me 1 page and Kalen writes me 10, and now you're both at the table, which means you both get equal spotlight time. So when I'm trying to piece through your background to pull out bits and pieces that I want to add into the game, okay, here, there's 4 paragraphs on this page. I can summarize these 4 paragraphs into 4 bullet points, and I can very easily incorporate those 4 bullet points into over the course of a game or two, right? Whereas if you give me 10 pages, now I'm lost. So how much, when do I incorporate these and how does this work? It's just, I feel like it's an overload on potential for you to use instead of distilling it down and being like, here's 10 things. I'm going to pick the 3 that I like the most, and these are what I want and what I would like my character to be focused on. Does it make sense, Yeah. So you can kind of like distill down what you're doing. Because then at the same time, the game should be about where your character is going, not where... they should be influenced by the character's background, but like the game is about what you're doing and where you're going. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. Just a thought. Like
flashing back to creating Fate characters together and when you create those initial aspects.
Yeah.
And it occurs to me now why it annoys me so much that you don't write them down. Like, it really makes me angry.
I remember the stories behind them.
I know, but then you tell me a story about my character and you don't write it down and you just write my aspect and I don't remember the story. Oh. Like, I remember it that day, but if I want to go back and, I need you to write it down. Because then if we don't play it for a month, I can read it again and be like, oh, that's who I am.
I think we have gotten through the point where I've told a lot of them, hey, I can't read all of this right now. Right. You're going to... Maybe I'll piece through it if I can. I'm going to try and get this, yada, yada, yada. But I think a lot of them have gotten to the point where they want to write it, one, for themselves, and they want to write it for... They want to get more attached to their character via writing it, and I really do enjoy that. Because they are really attached to their characters. It's important to them.
Have you killed any of them?
Yeah, I've killed a lot. I've killed a lot of very...
Cool. Because that's the only thing I have a problem with that sometimes, is like if I put a... couldn't see myself doing it, but if I put the work into writing like a 10-page thing about my character, if I got killed and it wasn't like in some crazy epic end of the game, end of the campaign kind of thing, I'd be like, man, I spent a lot of time working on that and now I'm just done? That's kind of sucks.
Listen, that's how a lot of people feel about life. I spent a lot of time working on that and this is how it ends.
That's how I'm playing a game, not life, all right? But I don't know. I kind of come back and forth because I feel like sometimes when you build a character up so much and you love it so much that there's a reluctance for the game master to go soft on you because I don't really want to punish this character too much because, well, then you'll really be mad.
And I will admit, I personally, that is one of my weaknesses as a dungeon master is, yes, I do kill characters. I don't kill them as often as they should be. Mm-hmm. And part of it's because somewhere down the line, I become attached to their characters. They become attached to their characters. They're all attached to my NPCs. I'm attached to my NPCs. The other half of it is half the time they're just too hard to kill. But that's besides the point.
You should just run loads of Apocalypse World and realize, just kill them all.
Just kill them all.
Well, see, that's the thing. It's like name everybody and drive them like a rental. If you need something to matter, kill that NPC because it tells them, hey, this shit matters. People are dying. Do you know what I mean? And it could be you next. You know what I'm saying?
Just like kill them all. I'm just thinking right now, as you say that it would be like wicked fun to play Apocalypse World set in Warhammer 40K.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Skulls for the Bone Throne, that kind of thing.
Right.
Apocalypse World style.
I know one of our most impactful deaths is one of our players had a character who raised an NPC who was just a kid. And then my main that I like to do in games is I like my characters to make hard decisions. That's what I want them to do. And the cowboy
sacrificed the child, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. The cowboy character, as we'll call him, his name is Baton, had to shoot the child in the back of her head in front of her sister and then lie to the original character about the whole thing so that he didn't get his head beat in by a hammer. And it was a lovely scenario to watch him have to struggle through doing each of these things because it was just hard for it. He felt for the character. for his character, for the character he killed, for the character's sister, for the player. And I really what I want out of my games more than anything is my players to feel something. Mm-hmm. I don't know what started that tangent, but it happened. It's a real thing.
So I have a weird, I don't know, way to segue. This may do this into two pieces maybe, but like talking about emotional impact in games, right? And I've ran lots of games and have had varying levels of success in terms of emotional engagement and that kind of stuff. But like, setting LARP aside, because it's different because you spend lots of time as that character and in walking in those shoes, it's kind of a different thing, right? Plus that, like when you're having an argument, like you quite literally have an argument, you know what I'm saying? So it's a different level of emotional intensity that you can experience sometimes, right? In terms of like the Night Witches game, that's been the most impactful and like emotionally invested that I've seen people around my table that I can recall. You know what I'm saying? And so did that come from the fact that, because those characters when they're made, it's a PBTA character, so it's very broad strokes, and I feel like the strength of PBTA is just like a movie. As you watch a movie, you learn about the character, and it becomes like more and more detail added, right? Mm-hmm. And the same thing happened with Night Witches. So in the course of this game, spoiler alert or whatever, but like there have been several characters that have in the storyline that have died or not come home and all this kind of stuff because it is a war zone. And I know that game has a more tangible reality to it because everyone has watched some kind of a World War II movie or documentary. So it's like a more tangible kind of a thing than just like the Harper War against the Zentarum, like whatever. Like I don't really have any real connection to that. You know what I'm saying? Like no one knows an actual Harper, right? So like, but like in those games, in editing them, I can hear when I edit it the emotional resonance of like the groans and the oh no, and it's like at a different level. So where did that level of engagement come from? Like, was there something that contributed more to that or less to it? Or, do you know what I'm saying?
So I can only speak like from my side of the table, but I would say that it's like a multi-pronged thing that I think you have difficulty replicating in the future because part of it is the fact that we're recording it. Right. So there's a level
everybody's on.
There's a decreased level of fuckery going on because of that. Another aspect is the other people role-playing at the table. Like, when other people are emotionally invested in what's happening, then I'm more likely to be emotionally invested in what's happening as well. So if you're approaching your role-playing with a degree of seriousness, then I am, likely to step up my game to match that. Right. Some of it is longevity of the game. Right. It's been going on for a while. The realism, like you said, like
you feel like an actual connection.
Well, and even beyond that, the characters, like the portraits are actual women that served as night witches in the war. Like they're real people that you're playing. And yeah, World War II, like that's pretty impactful just in and of itself. Mm-hmm. And then I also think the letter writing thing added a level of background and a depth to the characters that was not there even before we started doing that. Mm-hmm. It was kind of like forcing us to take a moment and role play and consider what we have back home or what we don't have back home.
What kind of gives context to a life outside of the adventure part of your character? No matter what genre you're in, it's a moment for you to write a letter home and be like, well, this is the moments when I'm soft and I'm weakest, and this is what my life looks like when I'm not out chopping goblins and two and whatever.
Yeah, it's a moment just specifically to add depth to your character. It serves no other purpose. Right. And so I think it's that. It's a cluster of things.
I was just curious because it's like as editing it when there's a moment where one of the characters has to shoot a loved one because they're a traitor. And like the anguish and the groan and the no, and then like not batting an eye because I'm so angry I'm going to kill this person because they betrayed us all. They betrayed our country. They betrayed our people. They betrayed the military. All of it. And like it's the most recent episode that I edited, so it's sort of fresh in my mind. But you could just hear the frustration and anguish, and not just in the player but in everybody else around because they realized the ramifications of what would happen because of things that were said and letters that were written to people and what might get found out. And now are you on the chopping block because of that? It was like a very broad kind of thing. It was like multi-leveled, like realization of like, oh my God, you betrayed me. I've got to kill you. Also, and then like next layer, oh my God, they know what we said. Next layer, oh my God, there's a letter. Next layer, it was just it's like this ballooning, kind of thing.
I think there's an interesting thing that happens with that too. Partially because of story investment and partially because of the Powered by the Apocalypse system, in that the most likely outcome is that you fail to some degree or another.
Right.
So you become used to coming up with, hearing these things that go wrong. And I find that in that game, I've become very likely to suggest something terrible to happen to me or one of the other people we're playing with just because it would make a really good addition to the story. Like, this is going to end so badly for us.
Now,
However,
I have the issue myself of whenever I'm a player, I have the same problem, but not necessarily. My character isn't necessarily as dispensable. So I have a tendency to run headlong into conflict because I know it'll be interesting. And I know that somewhere down the line I'll care. And somewhere down the line I'll be mad at myself because I'm the one who did it.
Right.
But
it's going to be such a good story.
Exactly.
And that's the point, right? I mean, for me anyway. So speaking of emotional impact, I think Carrie had mentioned before, so I just have to ask, have you made someone cry at your table before?
I don't know that I made someone cry. I did make someone leave the room and scream silently in their bathroom for 30 minutes.
Maybe I'm just not very good.
He got up. He was
terrifying.
playing a very what's the word I'm looking for? A very intellectual character who had gone through this great web of deception to fool everybody and get away scot-free. He is one step from leaving, and the NPC he trusted the most spoke up and asked, "Why did you kill that child?" And
that outed him. I'm guessing
she outed him in front of the entire camp. He got up, he went to his bathroom, he started pacing, he closed the door, he just started pacing for 30 minutes, doing one of these counting things on his finger moves, talking to himself, trying to figure it out. At some point, he banged on the wall. He didn't cry, but man, he was torn. And finally, after 30 minutes, he came back. He gave his one line that he had been deliberating on for 30 minutes, and then we ended the session.
Can I know what the line was? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I remember the situation.
I'm just really curious.
Sometimes I think, though, that's what's nice about, so the reality of the world is that, when those moments happen in some terrible situation, you don't have time to deliberate in the back of your mind for 30 minutes about what the best way to handle the situation and response it is.
Right.
So sometimes it's one of those interesting things about, maybe putting constraints on those kind of things is no, what are you saying? Because then, that's the emotional, visceral reaction that would be coming out of the character, maybe. Do you know what I'm saying?
I think it's reasonable in the game to say that he got up and left the camp and just came back 30 minutes
we
later.
do attend to it differently. So one of the things we do is we do allow extra time and people to say what they think if your character is extremely intelligent. So going back to the DC Adventures game, I had a guy who was almost cosmic intelligent. I, as Kalen, as much as I like myself, I'm not cosmically intelligent. So what we ended up doing is we had Conscious 1, who was me, and then 3 other dudes were Conscious 2, 3, and 4, and we'd agree on the best thing for us to do at that moment, and then we'd proceed with that plan.
Oh, that's a really cool way to handle that. I like that. That's really cool.
So that I gave him that extra time because he was average is 10. I think he was 20 intelligence or something like that. So I gave him that extra time because it was a convoluted situation and his character would have probably planned it out. So I'll give him that time. But there have been times where I told people, no, you don't get to talk about this on the side. And one of my favorite things I've done is my characters were doing a stealth mission and the enemy was really perceptive to sound. And I made them sit around, and they were not allowed to talk to each other. The only time they were allowed to talk is when they were telling me an action. Not a thing they were saying, an action. Everything else, they had to pantomime to each other. And it was funny watching, I think, our rogue got orders from the fighter, and then went the exact opposite direction. And intentionally made a noise. And the fighter was like, "What are you doing?" He was like, "I thought that's what you wanted."
So there's another question too. I think she had about
Okay.
Yeah, making players real world angry, spurring arguments and having someone yell at you at the table.
So
have you had that? Have you experienced that where someone has gotten actually angry and yelled at you?
I think we've gotten to heated rules questions, but I'm not going to say that those rules questions weren't at least a little bit spurred by what happened in character. Mm-hmm. They weren't super heated. I don't think no one has ever yelled at me about something that happened in a character, I don't think. I think people have yelled at me about rules questions, and what was powering their frustration was what happened in the game because of those rules.
But they've still yelled at you.
Maybe it was a yell. Maybe it was they would just raise their voice. I don't know that it was a yell.
Okay.
I've been yelled at in LARP. That's like I said. It's
LARP is such a special monster.
Yeah, and specifically like Mind's Eye Theater.
Yeah,
and so I've seen, but there's a lot of time and investment that goes in. I've seen people like I'm things went wrong for their character, and their character either had to leave or retire. But like they're like, I need a break. I'm going to take a couple weeks off, and then I'll be back to play again because I'm frustrated and I want to come back at it with a clean head and whatever, and that kind of thing. So I don't know. I mean, like we've been playing for so long, or that it's hard to remember because I would prefer it that like if a player is mad at me. In a way, I actually prefer it to be that two players are mad at one another, because what I generally like to do when running games is to put people in situations where they have to make decisions about the people around the table around them, right? So Lee and Carrie being the perfect example when she eats his brain, right? So like I didn't make her do it. I set things in motion and kept pushing.
But I'm okay with Lee being angry because he's my brother. But like I don't know that I would want I wouldn't want to ruin a friendship because of a game.
Well, no, but I think that's a little bit. I think that maybe that's where you start to get into an area. So
they can't just divorce. That takes several months.
Right, on the paperwork, you're like, she ate my brain. Not my actual brain, but she ate my character's brain. It was a dark game. I don't know. Well, my thought is that if you're crossing into that territory where like it's going to be like long term, I think that, maybe you're too invested in your character and you need to realize we're here to tell a story and have fun ultimately, and it's just a game. Like, I get it. I like my characters. I've had some that are really cool. But, like, it's not real life. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, so I don't know. I think that's when you get into that area of bleed or whatever, where things start to cross over a little too much. And then if that's the case, I think that it's probably better to either ratchet the game back a little bit or, change the style of games that you're playing and themes that you're dealing with maybe because...
So now you only get to play Tales of Equestria with friendship tokens. There is no more possibility of combat or player death or any conflict of any kind.
Yes,
You've been My Little Ponied.
We should probably talk about bleed or whatever in an actual session because I have seen it more so in LARP. I think it's easier to get more emotionally invested in LARP because you actually sort of wear that skin for that game in a way, as opposed to I'm sitting down at a table and playing theater of the mind. I'm actually walking around and talking and doing things. Mm-hmm. So that's probably a good topic for another episode. But like, I definitely think that there's a fine line between emotional investment that is good and adds to the game before something is now taking away from the game.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Healthy versus unhealthy investment in,
Right. Well, I even think there's an area that's still not necessarily unhealthy, but it's not going to add to the game anymore. It's going to take away from the game. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like if you're so caught up in your character that you're paralyzed to make a decision that might be bad. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't want this outcome to kill my character. Like, it's just figure it out and tell the story, man. Let it roll. Like that's what we're here to do. You know what I mean? So
just on the subject of yelling at players and being yelled at, I do remember when I very first ran a game here, because I ran Witches for you guys.
Oh.
I know that was weird playing with you guys because I used to, at the time, I didn't even really play with the Danville crew. I just played with my Bloomington group. Mm-hmm. And I was used to playing with them. I was used to their emotions. And then Carrie, I remember, played a lawyer who had sold her soul. For those of you who don't know how Witch works, you sell your soul to a particular demon. That demon gives you favors in exchange and gives you powers, and you're trying to kind of mess with the demon and so on and so forth. But essentially, she sold her soul for power, and her demon was excruciatingly mean. And having her player character yell at me, I was like, oh. I didn't, for a second I was like, wait, is she actually mad at me?
She's actually mad.
Did I actually do something? And now I know that wasn't the case, but at first I just wasn't used to the emotion at the group, so I was like, oh, I'm sorry.
Never apologize.
It's like last night we played Bookhounds of
Sometimes
London.
Carrie can get legitimately upset sometimes, but it's like short-lived and like she enjoys it. Right. That's the thing. Like,
well, that's like last night we were playing Bookhounds of London, and my character is Trail of Cthulhu, so I have this really sort of arrogant, pompous surgeon character.
He's so bad.
Yeah,
he's so
like I intentionally in game don't learn characters' names.
That's awesome.
So that I can't refer. I was looking at Carrie's character. She did something that I was actually happy with, and I was like, "That was great." What's her name? Like, as I asked the person next to us, and like there's some, and we were at the table. It was me, Lacey, Lee, Carrie, and Kurt was running the game. And then there's two other players that we've played with games with before, but we don't play with them a whole lot. So they're not really familiar with it. So it's kind of one of those weird things where you're trying to be like a real, just giant condescending turd. And then I would say things and it makes me laugh because it's so ridiculous. Do you know what I'm saying? So because I'm trying to also
do a good job of breaking the tension too. Because then they like come in and I'm like, well, we're just going to go to the back, and he's like, well, you can't go to the back. We don't know them. They're just family because they said they are. And I'm like, well, lucky for me, you're not the boss of me.
Yeah. So like, there's just
you don't get to tell me what to do.
So there's great moments, and I feel like breaking it up with like that character is just a huge ass, right? Mm-hmm.
And I'm a woman who wears pants in the 30s.
Yeah, so look out. Look out. But like, it's one of those moments where it's like so over the top that it's very like it's kind of ridiculous. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And even self-indulgent a little way. Like how it's just 100% completely ridiculous. And then I think that sort of like breaks it up a little bit because it doesn't come across as overly serious. And then also, like, I think it's hilarious because it's so bad and it's so ridiculous and everybody is kind of like leaned into it. So then like I say something and then I start like kind of like laughing to myself, realizing like how just, my God, this guy's a
ridiculous
turd.
Anyway, right? Because the whole premise is that you're people that own a bookstore that are hunting down rare and antique volumes. So you almost have to make it ridiculous in order for it to be fun. Like otherwise, you just be like, I'm a museum curator.
I have to clarify. I love that concept. I like that a lot.
I think it's great.
I wanted to run it that's why I got the Bookhounds book initially, and then Kirk.
And it's set in Cthulhu time, so you know there's always the chance that you open it up a book and start reading it, and then just lose your mind a little at a time.
Yeah, it's super interesting because the central conflict of the game then isn't like learning Eldritch lore or like killing the bad guy. It's like chasing down books, which changes everything. So it's like when we made the characters, Kurt, I was like, my guy is a World War I vet, right? So I served in World War I. So I'm like, okay, I probably should be able to shoot a gun. And he's like, don't spend points there because it's never going to come up. It's never going to be relevant. So it was interesting to still like tell you, like, I'm telling you, spend your points somewhere else so you can use them. That's never going to be relevant to the game. So it was interesting because it changes the way everything works. Do you know what I'm saying? When it's like combat is not completely off the table, but it basically is. You know what I'm saying? Like any kind of conflict.
He says that to an Egyptian with a blowgun. I'm just saying a pistol would have been handy.
Well, we found our way to sort of, in a more realistic sense, ways out of those kind of conflicts that are not like, hey, I'm just going to shoot this dude in the face. And, there's been a lot of bluffing. We've got a giant, English Mastiff that is a terror.
His name's Bernard.
Yeah. So, but it's interesting just the way that game has worked.
He's my favorite character in the game.
I am my own favorite character in the game. So, I don't know. I guess that's a way that it's been like in character at the table, but without trying, being that absolute turd. Do you know what I mean? But that's one thing I was kind of leery of is like, I know Lee and Carrie and Lacey, obviously, and Kurt, when we play those games, they're all on board. Like they know it's not, I'm just being, that character's a turd or whatever, and I get checked and all this kind of stuff and it's all, good. But it's one of the things I was concerned is when we introduced two new players that it wasn't going to be like, wow, that guy James, he's really a jerk. You know what I mean? So I was, I don't want to be that guy, but it's
Lee will get mad, but I feel like we've desensitized him at least a little bit.
Yeah. So. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap this one up here. We've been on now. It's an hour and 37 minutes. So we'll see what this comes down to when we cut it down. But as you guys know, we're a member of the Good and Geek Network. So quick promo for All Things Good and Nerdy, episode 359. We're in the end game.
Oh, I wonder what this is going to be about.
This week, it's fair game to have a spoiler-filled discussion of the Avengers Endgame. Prior to deep diving into spoilers, Anthony has the details on Ghost Rider coming to Hulu. Oh, I'm cautiously terrified. Ghost Rider is amazing, but everything that has been Ghost Rider has been... Yeah.
Listen, I don't care if it's popular to hate Nick Cage like it is to hate Nickelback. I still like Nicolas Cage, and I enjoy his movies.
I know they weren't bad, but like it's just
Take that and deal with
it. They could have been way better. Like he did the tornado sucking thing, and I was like, we couldn't get something better than like the Rock You Like a Hurricane Ghost Rider. You know what I mean? I wanted more.
Still better than Fantastic Four.
Willie geeks out over the Willow series coming to Disney, and Chris shares the details on the upcoming Spidey trailer, it will be spoiler-filled for Endgame. So you can check them out. That is All Things Good and Nerdy, episode 359, and you can find them on the Gonna Geek Network. I think that'll do it for us this week. So if you like what we do here, you can support us at patreon.com/justonemorefix and join our awesome patrons like Alistair H., Tiziano Furlano, Simon McNair, Alan White, and the OG Todd Olson. I think that'll do it for us, and we will see... go to our Patreon and check out Worms. It's pretty awesome. I think that'll do it for this week, and we will see you guys next week.
Thanks for listening. This has been an episode of Just One More Fix. Music has been provided by Kevin MacLeod. You can find him at incompetech.com. You can support us at patreon.com/justonemorefix or follow us on Twitter at JustOneMoreFix.